welcome to the ongoing series of class spotlights. Today we're going to be aiming our sights on a very well known class, which is the Kra, known for its precision, long range damage. So yeah, okay, so before we dive into the details, let's take a moment to actually have a look at the class itself. So the Kra is classed as essentially a ranged combat, so an archer. Wielding the power of bows, arrows, to strike from distance. A keen eye for agility, devastating precision, which makes them a true marksman on the battlefield. And I use this class almost every single day in almost every single fight. There's only a few where the fights are really based upon close combat, which is the only times I wouldn't really use them. But for day-to-day work, they are absolutely amazing. So in this video we'll be exploring everything that there is to know about the Kra class, so go through all their abilities, characteristics, gameplay styles, and even what kind of groups they are really good in. Also going through potential sets, styles, what kind of equipment you want to be using on them to suit your particular gameplay. So let's have a look. I've got a whole list of bullet points here that I want to go through just to make this a little bit easier. Okay, so to kick things off, a little general overview of the class. So they are absolutely fantastic with any characteristics. You can easily go full intelligence, full strength, full chance, full agility. They definitely don't want to be vitality. You could do a wisdom one, but really not going to be utilising what they're actually good at. But yeah, let's look at some of the actual abilities to start with, so you can get an idea of what the actual gameplay is, and the actual class mechanics. See how it all kind of ties together. So they do have chargeable spells. So ones that I will bring up. Punitive, just as a bit of a where is it? Punitive. So as you can see here, so the first time it is cast, well, for the first turn, it does just the basic damage. Now, in 2 turns, that damage increases by 36. In 4 turns, it increases again. So if you are going to be using them, you definitely want to be using them every time they're available. Otherwise, you do end up losing that debuff. You end up losing that buff. So improvements, so they do buff, so they have multiple buffs that can be used either on the Kra itself or on other characters. So things like distance shooting, which increases your range, bow skill increases your damage, and then you've also got powerful shooting, which increases your critical hit chance and also the power. Since the Kras are archers, close combat really isn't very good for them. So many of their spells will have a minimum range. So I will bring up something like Atonement, for instance, where you have to cast on something that's 6 or more away from you. So huge range on it, but in close combat, it's absolutely useless. It can't be used unless you can get yourself away, use it, and then run back, but not really worth it. Okay, let's go through some of these spells first. So you can see the ones which I tend to use more often than not, but again, it all depends on what kind of style you want to play. So you've got your magic arrow. So if you're don't really have that much range in your set, great addition. Good agility damage, steals range. So then you can use another spell which maybe you wouldn't have been able to reach before. Concentration arrow, one of my favourites. So essentially it is an X shape, so 3 cells each way. It will actually attract everything to the centre of, it'll essentially attract everything to the target which you've designated. Retreat, fantastic spell, always linear, so only use it once per target, but it will do really decent agility or air damage, and it also push back 4 squares. Erosion, erosive arrow. So for bosses where you really do need to focus on erosion, or even in PvP, being able to lower your enemy's maximum vitality is absolutely awesome, and again, decent air damage. Dispersing, essentially wherever you cast it, it will push everything 2 squares away. Okay, so we also have reprisal. So applies a gravity state and reprisal state to the target if the target is an enemy, and removes unparable MP from the target and inflicts damage on the caster. If the target's an ally, on the other hand, it removes unparable MP from their enemy attackers. So they get attacked, it guarantees takes away that MP. Doesn't affect summons, and it can't be unbewitched, which is awesome. Frozen Arrow. So essentially, great 3 AP spell, long range on it, and heals 50% of the damage that you cause. Paralyzed Arrow. So essentially, good fire damage in a 1 cell area. Can only be used once per turn though, but it does remove up to 3 AP. Burn Arrow is awesome. I use this quite often. So it is a straight line of 5, and pushes back 1 square, everything in it. It's really good if something's hiding behind a wall and you can attack it from the other side, just to kind of push it away from the wall, or if you want to push back multiple enemies at once. And Repulsive Arrow, very, very similar, where that also just pushes back 1 square, where Burning Arrow is 4, but has a line of 5 that it pushes back. This one is a straight line of 1 cell, so it is across rather than straight. Distance Shooting, extra range, absolutely fantastic spell. And Absolute Acuteness essentially takes line of sight off of all your spells for the rest of the turn. So this one can be really, really useful. Atonement, it is one of the charged spells. So it essentially, you want to constantly use it every time it's available, and the damage will go up and up, with it maxing out at turn 6. And Redemption Arrow is very, very similar, but this one is cast multiple turns, and just for the first turn, and every turn it just increases to once, so it just increases by 14 damage. Bat Sight is fantastic. Good range on this one. It's a 2-cell circle, so it reduces their range, and if there's anything invisible, it also finds them, reveals them for you. Crushing Arrow, great intelligence damage on this one. Also puts everything in whatever it hits into gravity state, which is the main reason I use it. Bow Skill, very basic spell. It just increases your damage from 60 or 70 at level 200 anyway. Okay, Recall Beacon is essentially a way for a crowd to get out of trouble. So you summon it, then on the following turn it will switch with you, and it can't be damaged by the crowd spells either. It can also be used like a bit of a block as well, so you can multiple uses for that one. Immobilize Arrow is just your 2 AP chance spell, steals an MP. Nice and simple, very useful. And Assailing Arrow, which is what I use, so I combine this with Concentration Arrow, so essentially drag everything all into one area. Assailing Arrow will then buff my craft for 100 power per enemy around it, up to 3 enemies, so an extra 300 power. So drag everything in, Assailing Arrow, and then straight away I've got 300 extra power for the rest of the turn, so I can lay out my Explosive Arrow, things like that afterwards. Punitive Arrow, essentially the same as Atonement. You'll want to keep it used, but this one maxes out at turn 4. Judgment Arrow, really interesting one. So you want to use this when you've used no MP. The more MP you use, the less damage it does. 2 lines of damage, but really fantastic damage, especially for 3 AP. Powerful Shooting, so an extra up to 12 crits, 290 power, can be used on the Crow itself or on allies. Tactical Beacon, so I'm going to read this one out. So summons a tactical beacon that can serve as an obstacle and a target. So you can summon it into the middle of something and then use your concentration to drag everything to that tactical beacon. It takes half the amount of damage from allies and is immune to Kraz spells. There can only be one tactical beacon. If there is another one summoned, this one will die. So it is essentially just a block. You can put it wherever you want to be able to utilize the rest of your spells. Plague and Arrow is awesome. So non-line of sight, 10 modifiable range. It's not the biggest range for a Kraz spell, but it's still up there. Medium damage, but if you've not got line of sight, it can be really valuable. Slaughter and Arrow is again another charge spell. This one is only one turn, but 4 AP, linear or diagonal only. Straight line, just linear only, but big air damage. Poison Arrow, so nice little poison, which is at the start of turn. So you cast it, start that turn, they take the damage, but it also removes up to 3 MP as well, or none, depending on what your MP reduction is. Conniving Arrow is awesome. So if you play your crowd with a panda, put 4 monsters around your panda, cast Conniving on the panda, it will hit all 4 around it. Can only be used twice per turn, 3 times per turn, or twice per target. But if you are playing with a panda, especially a tank panda, definitely worth having on. Okay, it's 2 really awesome and cool spells now. So Tormenting Arrow, one of my favourites. So 3 AP, long range, high crit chance, and massive amounts of damage, especially if you are stacking up on your critical hits, critical damage. So something like a no arrow set. Then Tyrannical Arrow, very, very similar, but every time, so it's 4 AP instead of 3, but every time an enemy is moved, it will then trigger the more damage. So you can hit once and then push, and it will keep hitting up to 3 times per turn. Destructive Arrow, so earth damage, good range, good crit chance, 2 times per target, and also reduces their damage by 60. So if you want to make sure you're not taking a massive amount of damage from something, you know it's coming, definitely worth having on. Barricade Shot, 4 AP, good earth damage, but also pushes back 2 squares. Now this one's not line of sight, or this one's, you need line of sight, but it's not linear or diagonal, so you can use it anywhere. So definitely worth having on. Absorptive Arrow, good air steal, so good heals from this one. And then one of my favourites is Devouring Arrow. A lot of people get confused with Devouring Arrow. So I am going to very quickly, before we move on, just show you actually how Devouring Arrow works. I'll go for the big one. Okay, let's have a look. Alright. Oh, I actually should put it on, shouldn't I? Let's try that again, shall we? Okay, so Devouring Arrow. So the more stacks, the more damage it does. So first stack up to 502, you'll see above it state 1. If I do it again, state 2. You can only cast it twice per target. So what I'll do now is, that is now ready for next turn. So now if I get that up to state 3, then I'll want to cast that Devouring on anything else. And that will then hit the carrot and trigger the 3 on there. And if I show you it with 1, so that's with 1 stack, 2 stacks, and I can also show you Judgment as well. So 1498, but if I move 1 square, 1361. So you definitely want to we use it. Okay, so next spell. Next spell, Lashing Arrow. Very simple, linear or diagonal. 2 AP, pushes two cells back and gives 10% erosion. Withdrawal Arrow, essentially you cast it and it just retreats you by 2 squares from wherever you cast it on. Not the most commonly used spell, but definitely worth having available. Certain fights you might need it. Slow Down Arrow, I suppose more used really for PvP than PvM. Monsters don't really need, usually got far too much AP to worry about. But good chance AoE damage. If you can get a few of them in it, it's still worth having on. Striking Arrow, nice 2 AP spell, good chance damage when monsters are crowded. Essentially, it puts a state onto them that explodes at the end of that enemy's turn. So you put it on at the end of their turn, it blows up, and then does damage to everyone, all enemies within 2 squares of that, and it also removes a couple of AP. Lark Mirror is an interesting one. So it is essentially a trap. Single cell trap. It tracks enemies towards the center and removes MP from enemies within a 3 cell cross when it is triggered. So you walk into it, it pulls them in, and removes 2 MP from them. Eye for an Eye, I've never really used this spell that much, but it steals range from enemies, repels targets, and applies the Eye for an Eye state on targets if that target is an enemy. And the target attacks, it will steal range from the target. If the target is an ally, it repels the target's enemy attacker and steals range from them. So a way to get an extra bit of range potentially and keep yourself safe or keep them pushed back a little bit. Explosive is the same as it's always been really. Big AoE in damage, 3 cells circle, use it twice per turn. So using something like your concentration to pull them all in, then your assailing to buff up, and then explosive to do that big AoE damage. Now, fulminating is an awesome spell. If you are at a fight with a big amount of monsters, if you can essentially get them all lined up so they're all within a cell or 2 of each other, it is almost like a domino effect. So it hits one to the next, to the next, to the next. Now, the further that chain goes, the more damage it does. But it can only be used once per turn, and it doesn't crit. So for things like ink and paper, for vortex, things like that, where there is constantly loads and loads and loads of summons and mobs on the map, definitely worth it. Then Vendetta. Okay, so it does increase the damage that you take. So you take an extra 10% damage, but it does give you an extra 15% crit, which is just for so you get extra crits for 2 turns and an extra 10% damage for just the 1 turn. So it depends if you really need the crits. Then Sentinel. Which is again an awesome spell. So using Sentinel, you gain an extra 30% spell damage. So if you have the AP for it, being able to concentration, then assailing, and then using Sentinel and then fulminating on a really big mob, you can end up doing 20 to 30,000 damage on a mob if it's big enough. Okay, so we've gone through the basic spells of the Kra. Now, what kind of build do I really kind of recommend? There is multiple builds you can look at. So on here, so you can go your single element. So if you really wanted to do damage in just one element quite easily, Kras can do it in any element. I definitely wouldn't recommend anything that isn't crit based. So for myself, I actually use essentially no marrow and tread fast, just to get all the extra crits and all the extra damages, get them as high as I can. So you, like I said, so you can go any element, but I would always recommend Omni for a Kra, especially at 200, just to gain all those extra damages. Now, the way sticks for these ones for you. Okay, so as you can see here, I have 171 critical damage on my Kra, which means every line of damage I cause gains 171 damage. So with something like the Strange Wand, straight away, it's because there's 3 lines of damage, it is 171 critical damage times by 3. So it's essentially going to be about an extra 500 damage before it even calculates the rest of the hits. So definitely worth looking into making sure you've got as high critical damage as possible. And then the same also can be said for Tormenting, Tyrannical Arrow, and all the rest of the ones that have multiple lines. So what I have essentially done with mine is I have stacked up as much power and damage as I can, to be able to essentially be a bit more of a, I want to say a bit of a glass cannon, which doesn't run in. Okay, so I want to have a little talk about just some compositions that work really well with Kras. So as I said earlier, pandas are very good. You want a class that can keep the rest of the monsters away from the Kra. You want the Kra to be away from the mob. So something like a Kra with a panda or an NU or a Sedita, or even a panda and Feka. All those combinations work really well. They keep the Kra being able to attack from a distance, keeping it safe, and essentially letting it do its job. But I hope this guide really helps you decide whether you want to make a Kra or not. They are an absolutely fantastic character, and I really would recommend having one in a team. But I'll be looking at the next class and seeing which one we're going to do next. Yeah, please remember to hit the subscribe button for some more videos, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.